wonderful story of love. Tell it to me again, wonderful story of love. Wake the immortal strain, angels with rapture announce it, shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love. 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 Though you are far away, wonderful story of love. Still he doth call today, calling from Calvary's mountain, down from the crystal bright fountain, e'en from the dawn of creation. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love.
Pick up in verse 6 of Solomon chapter 3. What is that coming up from the wilderness like a column of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the fragrant powders of a merchant? Behold, it is the litter of Solomon. Around it are 60 mighty men, some of the mighty men of Israel, all of them wearing swords and expert in war, each with his sword at his thigh against the terror by night. King Solomon made himself a carriage from the wood of Lebanon. I'll stop right there just to ask this question. What wood is associated with Lebanon? Cedar. So that's what it's talking about. He made its post of silver, its back of gold, its seat of purple. Its interior was inlaid with love by the daughters of Jerusalem. Go out, O daughters of Zion, and look up upon King Solomon with the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of the gladness of his heart. So the scene changes dramatically. We go from the betrothed in the middle of the night, missing her beloved and searching in the street to find him throughout the city, to this procession that is marked by beauty and security and celebration. The description of the carriage itself tells you how lavish and beautiful this is. We've got the best wood in the world that constructs this thing. It's overlaid in gold and silver. It's got purple cushions inside of it. That's a sign of what? Royalty. Why is that a sign of royalty? Why is purple a royal color? Because it was very hard to make at the time. Not as much as it once was today, but it was very hard to make. The things that you used to dye purple were hard to come by, made it very expensive, and most people couldn't afford it. So anyway, we've got the royal aspect first introduced, and then at the end of these verses, it's very expressly stated, what is Solomon wearing? A crown. So all of this royalty is placed around it. The security is quite amazing. Listen, the handful of Secret Service agents that the president follows around, has followed him around, seem to be nothing compared to the armies that Solomon's surrounded by, with weapons at the ready. This is a royal wedding procession. And the idea of the wedding procession, and particularly the royal wedding procession, seems to have been familiar throughout the Near East, because we're not given a whole lot of description of what's going on or why it's going on. It's not even called by name as such. But we are told, for instance, on the day of his wedding, so we know that this procession is somehow associated with his wedding. Um, uh, the book assumes that familiar imagery that is portrayed here and then doesn't need to describe every detail of it. And unfortunately, we're going to talk in just a moment, we don't actually know every detail of what went on. Lots of stories get circulated about these things, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Um, the interest here is not simply in documenting an ancient ceremony. That's actually what we need to understand. That's not what it's trying to do. It is portraying the dignity, the security, and the joyful expectation surrounding the covenant union that is the focus. The focus is always that intimate fellowship which they are working toward. So let's talk about the Israelite marriage a little bit, what we do know about it, and maybe some things about what we don't know about it. Israelite marriage ordinarily began with a betrothal. What is a betrothal? Okay, it's a promise. It was a little bit more formal at that point in time. It was essentially a contract. Um, there was usually even some security that went along with that contract. So we got this family agreement that preceded the couple's actual establishment of married life. Um, I don't even know that we have an idea of exactly how long betrothals normally lasted, but they were very, very, very forceful. We have to go way ahead in history to get this, and so it's hard to know if they were as forceful at the time of Solomon as they became at the time of Jesus's birth. But at the time of Jesus' birth, as the betrothal between Mary and Joseph is presented to us early in the Gospels, that is treated essentially the same as marriage in terms of as the legal obligation. When Joseph believed that she had not been faithful to her promise, the whole idea of putting her away is there. We would not associate the idea of putting someone away until after the marriage had taken place. The marriage hadn't taken place yet. They had not yet come together, the text says. And yet, still in that line of thinking is if this person has not been faithful to me, I can put them away. Um, so we don't know that betrothals were that strong in the time of Solomon, but I would argue that they were probably more strong than what we consider an engagement. In modern America, how binding is an engagement? Yes, not much. Yes, ma'am. Right. It was. It's much more severe. What's about the worst thing that happens in a modern U.S. engagement that dissolves? You lose potentially a little bit of money, and the primary amount of money usually is what? The engagement ring. Whatever you paid for the engagement ring, because you're probably not getting it back. Now, they may not keep it either, but they're not giving it to you. They're going to do one of two things with it. What are they going to do? They're going to sell it and get the money, or they're going to throw it into the into the river or the lake or the sea or wherever's convenient for it to be lost. Whatever you're going to, you're not getting it back because you're not going to benefit from this thing ending. But anyway, that's kind of how we think of an engagement. Very fickle. It's not unusual for an engagement not to be seen through, much less so in the time uh, that we're talking about. Engagements were taken much more seriously. So anyway, when the appointed time arrived, and I use that language loosely, Um, we don't know exactly what the appointed time consisted of or even who made it. Lots of myths around that. And we'll maybe talk about some of those in a moment because there's some stories that you might have heard. Yes, sir. A bunch, but this one is again not being presented, in my opinion. Well, I'll say it like this: this is either his first one, or it's his most significant one, or it really doesn't have any reference to any one specific marriage of his, but is simply a conglomerate idea of his marriage for teaching purposes. That's the way I'm going to paint that. Because you know what never happens in this book? The wife is never identified. Uh, Therefore, the wife could be any wife. So we've gone along here. The appointed time is close. I'm going to use that language. The bride is prepared, she adorns herself. The groom then comes with his companions to receive her. We actually do have some echoes of this even to this day. Anybody been to a wedding recently? Anybody seen a whole slew of people standing up there with the bride and groom? Anybody know what those people do? They just stand there and don't do anything. They're groomsmen and bridesmaids, and then there is a best man and I mean, basically the most important job is here, hold my bouquet. Eh, Something, unless you have a ring bearer, then that messes that one up. Uh, but uh, but yeah, I mean, there's not really any work for them. Uh, this was a little different. His companions consisted of his close inner circle and the soldiers and the carriage driver and this whole group of people. And included in this is the burning of incense. You see the column of smoke rising before you even see the procession. That's how much incense and such is being burned. You smell their coming, is described in these verses. Um, and so all this is going on. This is a very public thing. And what is happening here is the groom is coming to receive his bride, and then she leaves her household and goes with him to the household or the place prepared for the celebration. We also don't have a lot of information about the celebration part of it. In fact, very little information about the celebration part of it. It personally, I limit my knowledge to what we're told in John 2 about the marriage feast that Jesus went to. And there's not a whole lot there. But we can learn some things from it. Sometimes these things lasted days. That seems to be directly correlated to how wealthy the families were and things like that. We do know from like Matthew 22, the king's wedding feast story, that at that level, the king even supplied clothes for the guests so that you were properly attired. And it goes through that whole thing. And then when he comes in and finds someone not properly attired, he throws him out. Why does he throw him out? Because this person is without excuse. Everything they needed has been supplied to them. They just haven't applied it. And there's a spiritual lesson in that parable for us. But anyway, that's what's going on here. There is no good evidence for a standardized officiated ceremony comparable to our modern wedding. We don't know what they did. I don't even know if they did anything. I don't know if this may be the official ceremony, the traveling to the house and picking her up, bringing her back to the place, and then we just celebrate what's going on. Then the later consummation, and everybody knows, okay, they're married. It's certainly very public and seen. I do believe that at this level of a royal public wedding, that it's probably a little different than the common average person's wedding, in the same vein that no, how many of you witnessed my wedding with my wife? There's one person in the room that saw me marry my wife. How many of you saw Charles and Diana get married? Or Charles and Camilla get married? Or, yeah, on TV, that's what. But mine was not broadcast on TV in a foreign country. And that's my point. There's much more interest in the royal wedding than there is in an average person's wedding. And it's a much bigger deal. Because I didn't get married in that big palatial place that they got married, and the head of the national church was not the one that officiated my wedding, and I didn't have armed guards doing all their thing and bands and orchestras playing and all the stuff that goes along with the days and days and days of celebration around the royal wedding. So I believe that there is probably, uh, at least to one degree or another, some similarity here, but we don't know what happens. The marriage was publicly recognized through the family's agreement, the receiving and transfer of the bride, and the wedding feast, our celebration. Finally, the couple's entrance into married life and the consummation of the relationship marks its beginning. That's what the word consummation means. So the festivities we know could have transpired for several days, not necessarily presented here in this book as being that long, but I think in ordinary application at a royal wedding, it probably would have been a multi-day event. Care should be taken not to read later Jewish customs back into this period. And this is what I was talking to you about a moment ago. There's some popular descriptions that add some details that the scripture doesn't add here, such as the groom building a room at the father's house. You ever heard that story? Okay, the groom would build a secret room at the father's house, and the father alone determined when it was ready. And so we've got this. The groom's arrival was deliberately unexpected. Now, there is some New Testament references to a groom coming at an unexpected time for people waiting for his arrival. But that's a much later thing. Um, we can't establish that as an Israelite marriage custom. There's not any details that actually say, okay, we know that this is how it was done, and it was done this way consistently across the board. This was how they did it. There's just not enough evidence for that. There's very little, apparently, evidence about what constituted the marriage ceremony, or if they even had a formal ceremony. So we got to be very careful about projecting our own concepts of marriage and later things that the Jews did practice back into this time in space. And the other thing that we need to be careful of is not to get caught up in the pomp and in the circumstance and miss the point, which is exactly what the Pharisees did with religious things. It's the point Jesus was making when he said that you strain at gnats and swallow camels. You're missing the important thing. You're worrying about things that are of no significance, and you're missing the thing that really matters. We got to be careful not to do that, not get all caught up and excited about the peripheral part of the story that the writer, by inspiration, so God, didn't see fit to include. What's the important thing? The groom has come to receive his bride. That's the important thing. Song of Solomon 3, 6 to 11, which is the last half of this chapter, is portraying an exceptionally magnificent royal form of the wedding procession, leading toward the marriage and ultimate union depicted starting in about chapter 4, verse 16, and on through chapter 5. And so we're moving toward the covenant union, and that's the important thing. This is now going to be completely intimate, joined together. How does the Bible present marriage? Starts back in Genesis 2. A man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. We're getting toward that. There's no longer this, where is my beloved? I'd love to find him. Well, follow the tracks and you can find me. And then coming together and talking between the closed door or the latticed window. And then, oh, I'm missing him. Let me go out and look for him. No more of that. Ultimately, this inseparable union. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. This inseparable union that we're moving toward, that's coming up. So the bridegroom comes with dignity worthy of the covenant. How serious is the covenant? Now, here's an interesting area of discussion. I don't know that I want to spend a whole lot of time with it because it's not really part of my outline, but it is pretty interesting. How important, or is there a level of importance between one marriage and another marriage? Is my question clear enough? Maybe it's not. Does it matter that this is a royal marriage as opposed to a commoner's marriage? Yeah, not to God. Marriage is marriage. And so when I say this procession is presented in a way that is worthy of the covenant that it is inaugurating, understand that's talking about the value of the covenant itself, the relationship and the joining together, not the people, not the trappings. So it emerges from the wilderness here. I think that symbolism is important. This procession emerges from the wilderness and immediately captures the attention of people. They see the columns of smoke coming from the distance, and they smell the incense, and they are aware. So we got this fragrance and this beauty and this splendor, and it's all emphasizing that this is not an ordinary arrival. This isn't just somebody driving up to say hi. There's something significant about this. We do this from time to time, don't we? For certain major events, we might rent a limousine and arrive to pick someone up in a limousine instead of just driving in our own car if we have the means to do it. Or we might have a limousine prepared to whisk someone away from an event. That's not uncommon in marriages. Tell you somewhere else it is extremely common in our society. You know where else it's very common? Funerals. I would suspect that most people in this room, if they've ridden in a limousine, it has been associated with a family funeral, more likely than anything else. But those are huge events. And the reason why you do something special like that, and you don't just have a common arrival, is because of the significance of the event. There's a local funeral home. When I drive up, if I'm doing a service associated with them, when I drive up, there's a special parking place for me. And an attendant actually comes out and meets me at the spot, takes my key, and asks me this question: are you going to drive in our lead car? Are you going to drive your own car? And I'll say, I don't care, or I need to do this, but whatever the case, you know what they do? They actually wash my car. And then if I'm driving, put it in line Why do they do that? Because it is a significant event and they don't want a dirty car leading the procession. So their cars are clean and shined and waxed. They make sure that any other car that is associated with the lead of that procession is properly prepared because it's a serious thing. That's exactly what's being described here. This is not just a common arrival. This is something significant and something that catches people's attention. And the bride has increasingly recognized the excellence of the one that she loves, and that excellence is put on full display and visible to everyone at this point. Uh, we've seen the bride get more and more enamored and open to discuss how wonderful her beloved is and how excellent he is, and all of these. Now this is put on display for all to see. The bridegroom possesses both the desire and the ability to protect what belongs to him. He doesn't come unprepared. There are 60 mighty men that are surrounding him. 60. Um, Security. That's what this represents, not conquest. Security. Jesus does not, for instance, come to us unable to protect. What is that statement of Paul? I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep what I have entrusted unto him against that day. This is a visual demonstration of Solomon's ability to protect and keep what is being entrusted to him. She is being brought into the care of one who is fully able to protect and preserve that relationship. So love is not merely affectionate. We've talked about the affection already, but that's not all that it is. It also provides security for the one who is loved. And we need to understand that. And to make the practical application of these things, we need to understand that in our relationships. That our relationships should not only show that we are affectionate towards someone, but also they should preserve and keep the safety and well-being of the person in the relationship. That applies to our marriages. That applies to our families in general. That applies to the local church. We should, what would be the idiomatic expression today for us? Have one another's back. Peggy's teaching, so I can't force her to answer this publicly, but Peggy, 4 brothers, 3 brothers. Yeah, 3 brothers. That's what I thought, but I didn't want to be wrong. Had 3 brothers that she spent most of her life uh, getting picked on by. But if someone in the community did something to her, they were the first ones to step up and say, "You're not messing with my sister," and ready to defend her, ready to protect her. That is exactly how relationships are supposed to be. We should feel more secure because we are in them. And when relationships exist that remove our security from us, something is terribly wrong. That's true in the local church. That's true in the family environment. That is certainly true in marriage. If a spouse is afraid and feels endangered because of their spouse, something terribly wrong is happening. Because security is something that should just go along with the relationship. The preparations reflect the joy and honor that associate these unions. The description of Solomon's carriage, well, it kind of draws attention to some careful construction. There clearly is a special carriage. How many carriages do you think Solomon already had? And yet on this day, a particular carriage is made, and careful description of that carriage. And then the interesting thing to me is the description of how the interior was decorated by the ladies in love, simply describing the care that they put into the preparation of this thing. All of that detail contributes to the significance of the occasion. Why was it so important? Even the people who weren't involved directly in the marriage were still completely invested in the preparations for it. Very significant. Love is extremely important. Marriage is extremely important. Relationship is extremely important. How much time and effort should we put into relationship? And yet, what do we do a lot of times? This is reality check, examine yourself and be honest. What do we do a lot of time with regard to our relationships? Anybody? Okay, sometimes we walk away from it because it's difficult. Take it for granted. We take them for granted, which leads to the difficult. And then the lack of commitment leads to the walking away. It didn't start that way. One of the things I ask people that I counsel with who come to me and say, look, we're having trouble. We want to, the language they use is have marriage counseling. I'm like, okay, I'm not a marriage counselor, but I can talk to you from the biblical perspective about what your obligations are. But one of the things I ask when I talk to them is, why? Why did you marry them in the first place? Because if you can get people to remember how they felt and assess the relationship when it began, and then they honestly compare how they feel and what they're doing today, they realize, you know what, I'm not putting as much into this as I should. And quit focusing on what the other person is or is not doing and start realizing, you know, some of this is what I'm not doing. And that's a healthy thing for all of us to do. But that level of preparation is extremely important here. Covenant love is ultimately celebrated openly. That is another thing that is set forth here. The daughters of Zion are invited to behold the king wearing the crown. Come out and look at him. His crown for his wedding day. And so what grew privately through two individual people's desire and pursuit and growing fellowship now becomes an open, celebrated thing. Is there any parallel to that in our spiritual lives? Give you a hint. Think Romans 10, 9 and 10. Think Romans 1:16. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Romans 10, 9 and 10 says what? For with the mouth, profession is made unto salvation. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord. Jesus taught that if we are unwilling to profess his name before others, then he will what? He will deny us before his Father. So what began as a private desire becomes a very public statement. People should not be ashamed of their association with Jesus. Wives and husbands should not be ashamed of their association together. Families should not be ashamed of their family associations. Local churches should not be ashamed of our fellowship together. And if we are, then we know there's something that still needs to be developed and worked on. So the same covenant movement appears throughout the larger story of the Bible. God loved us first. He sought his people. He established his covenant through Christ with us. Those who belong to him now enjoy fellowship while anticipating the day when the relationship will be openly celebrated at the arrival of the bridegroom, where every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. The marriage supper of the Lamb, which is how it's presented in the gospel, is presented that way for the very same reason that this is being presented this way. Because there is a correlation between this kind of relationship and this other relationship. So we start getting some explanations and some advances in the progression that was established earlier in the book. Separation, pursuit, perseverance, restored fellowship, security, covenant honor, public celebration now is introduced, and anticipation. Anticipation of what? Most people in the room are married or have been married. If you haven't been married yet, this question doesn't apply to you, but if you have, feel free to answer this question out loud. How did you feel the morning of your wedding? Stressed? It's another word. Excited, that's a good word. What else? Anxious? Nervous? You need little butterflies? By the way, those little butterflies can be connected to nervousness. They can also be connected to excitedness. Why are you excited? What are you excited about? It's finally going to happen. I am finally going to be married. We are finally going to be together today. That anticipation is the way we should look toward the coming of the Lord. So much so that we get to the point that we say with the bride in the book of Revelation, "Come quickly." We want him to come because we want to be joined with. He said in John 17 that he is coming for what purpose? I've gone to prepare a place for you. Yep. I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I will come again and receive you unto myself, bring you back where we will dwell together. That's what we're in anticipation of. And that's what's being portrayed and pictured here. Anybody have any questions or comments? All right. The goal for next week, all the way through chapter 4. All the way through. Got to get caught up. I'm like 2 weeks behind. That's the goal. No promises.
Wonderful story of love. Tell it to me again. Wonderful story of love. Wake the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it. Shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love.